Hi guys, and welcome back to U.S. History with Mr. Snyder, and today we're going to talk about the second half of Topic 10, Lesson 1, about the Vietnam War and how we started and gradually got into it. So let's hop right in. Where is Vietnam? Just so you guys know. A lot of people in the 1950s and early 60s couldn't point to Vietnam on a map, but now they definitely can. So again, we're just south of China, just like the Korean War was technically south, but it's also east of China, next to Japan. Now the Vietnamese War is where we call Indochina, or we used to call it Indochina. It makes up the country on the east side of this area with Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Burma. And so that is where Vietnam is. Here's a brief history. Before World War II, France used Vietnam as a colonial, basically an extractive economy, using it for resources. Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and they called those three countries Indochina. They treat the Vietnamese citizens very harshly and very poorly there. So the Vietnamese citizens, this man right here, becomes a leader of the resistance movement and starts to fight back. He founds the Indochinese Communist Party in 1930, so they want to move to communism, not because of the Soviet Union telling them to, but because they think it's the best form of government to go with. So Ho Chi Minh becomes leader of the anti-French movement. In 1940, during Japan's period of expansion, it takes over Indochina and takes it from the French. Ho Chi Minh at this point forms the Viet Minh, and his group, the Viet Minh, its goal is to win independence from all foreign rule, Japan or France, doesn't matter. So when Japan loses World War II and is forced to give up its possessions, Vietnam declares its independence. Ho Chi Minh becomes the leader and bases the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence on the American Declaration of Independence, actually. But France says, hold on, this used to be ours before Japan took it over. We think we should have it back. So France moves back in after World War II and takes over the southern portion of the country. Ho Chi Minh vows to fight the war for independence from the north. And this will set the stage for the rest of the war, having a communist north half of the country and a non-communist south half of the country. And in 1950, the U.S. technically enters the war by giving $15 million in aid to France. And this was after the communist victory in China, because President Truman didn't want to see another country fall. Now, he's in kind of a predicament here. He needs to support France's efforts because he wants to keep France as an important, strong ally in the Cold War. But Truman, after World War II, supports decolonization of the world. So France wants a colony, we have to support them, so we end up supporting them. And Eisenhower continues the aid. From 1950 to 1954, we give over $2.6 billion in aid. And during this World War II, we used Ho Chi Minh against Japan, but now he is our new enemy. He's a communist aggressor who must be stopped. Eisenhower, we talked about the domino theory before, he says that we need to continue Truman's policies with Vietnam because the domino theory compares unstable countries to dominoes standing on their sides, and if one falls to communism, the rest of them are certainly going to fall as well. So we aid France militarily, but we're not going to put troops on the ground in Vietnam during the 1950s. France continues to fight, and they actually lose the war in May of 1954 at Dien Bien Phu, which is the French outpost where they surrendered. And we then go to a peace conference in Geneva, and we pass the Geneva Accords. The United States were there, the Soviets were there, France was there, and North Vietnam was there. France grants its independence to Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia as three separate countries, and we are just going to temporarily divide Vietnam into North and South at the 17th parallel, and free elections are going to take place in 1956 to unify the country. And during this time, we also create, we talked about SEATO before, but we create SEATO, or the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Think of it as a NATO for Southeast Asia. The goal is to contain the spread of communism in Asia, and it's us in Australia and other non-communist countries in Southeast Asia. So just to set the stage, North Vietnam is led by Ho Chi Minh. They are communist. Their official name is the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, or the DRVN. South Vietnam is led by Ngo Dinh Diem, so you would pronounce that Diem. They are anti-communist, and they are known as the Republic of Vietnam, or the RVN. And you may hear me or our literature refer to the ARVN, and that would be the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Heading into 1956, Diem cancels elections for the unification. He refuses to participate in them because he knows he'll lose people like Ho Chi Minh better, and the U.S. supports this. He then creates a corrupt government that restricts Buddhism, which is the overwhelming religion in that country, since Diem is a staunch Roman Catholic. He is pro-America, so we're okay with it. He can pretty much do whatever he wants at this point. The Vietcong then are formed, and their official name is the National Liberation Front, or NLF, Fighters. It's a communist opposition group in the South that attacks the Diem government. So these people live in the South, and they dress like civilians. They don't have an official uniform or anything like that, so it's very, very hard for troops to sort out who is Viet Cong, or who is Charlie, they would call them, and who is an actual civilian. So these are people in the South attacking the government in the South because they're working with the North. Ho Chi Minh supports and supplies the Viet Cong via the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This is a trail of, it's a network of trails and tunnels that goes into Laos and Cambodia, and then snakes its way back over into South Vietnam so that we can't attack it in Laos and Cambodia, even though we eventually do. The Kennedy administration steps up the aid and actually sends military advisors to Vietnam to advise the ARVN. Diem's popularity plummets from 1956 onward. He has a lack of popular support in his own country, but because he's friendly to the U.S., we keep him in power. This hasn't gone very well in our nation's history. And on November 1st, 1963, we finally had enough of it, and a U.S.-supported coup d'etat takes place, and Diem is removed from power and assassinated the next day. Kennedy at this point wants to get out of Vietnam. He wants to get out in November of 1963, but something else happens. He is killed before he can pull out of Vietnam. And then Johnson finally comes to power and will take over for the early part of the war. He has a monolithic view of communism where he doesn't think there's any differences in the type of communism. Communism is communism, and it's all bad. So this communism in North Vietnam is bad, even though it's not the same communism coming from Moscow. Monolithic communism thinks all communism comes from Russia, and that's not necessarily true. So in Johnson's war years, we have boats patrolling in the waters outside of North Vietnam, and a North Vietnam boat allegedly fires on a U.S. destroyer called the USS Maddox in the Gulf of Tonkin. So because of this, we have been fired upon. Johnson then asks Congress to give him power to respond, and they pass the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which greatly expands the president's war powers because he doesn't have to ask Congress to declare war anymore. Congress basically hand their war powers to the president at this point and say, go ahead, do what you need to do. And so he is going to use this to send troops to Vietnam, to send billions of dollars worth of supplies to Vietnam, to start a bombing campaign that will drop more bombs on Vietnam than all of Europe during World War II. It is really, really a nasty situation we're getting into, but Johnson escalates the war. And that's all I have for you today, so please fill out your learning targets and bring them back to class, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.